And then please make sure that your microphones are always muted. You can always also show your video so that you have a great interaction experience. Okay, so for today, we have a speaker, that's Dr. Gareth. It's so nice to have him back again so that we'll learn a lot of things. I'll just do a brief introduction and then Dr. Gareth will just start the session. So Dr. Gareth is the director of the Global Content at Research Square Company. He's a scientific author, he's a researcher, he's a content creator, he's a journal manager, and has worked for more than 18 years as the editor-in-chief. He has a PhD in geology and then biology from the University of Bristol. And then he's worked with a number of research institutions and also in some schools. He's an active teacher and a researcher affiliated with some couple of universities. He's conducted a number of online and then face-to-face training sessions, and all these are accredited by the UK and Irish Higher Education Authorities. Please kindly help me and join me welcome Dr. Gareth. Dr. Gareth, thank you so much for having you today. Please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back. Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. I hope you're all doing absolutely great. Let us know where you're from. Like, put your name and where you are from, like, in the chat. Like, I'm seeing that people are doing that already. It's great to see everybody and great to see so many people for this event. Let me just share my screen if I can, and then we can get going with this session. What have I done? Thank you for bearing with me. Just a second here. All right. So, thank you very much for joining. Thank you all for being here. Like, do put your questions, do put any comments that you have, do put any feedback that you have on this training event, like in the chat. Let us know where you're from. And please, tell us about yourselves, like give us some feedback, give us some information about how you're doing. And yes, as was just said in the introduction, my name is Gareth. I'm working now as a consultant for a number of companies, at the moment with a company called Bentham Science Publishers. You may have heard of Bentham Science. Have a look at Bentham Science if you haven't had the chance to learn about Bentham Science in the past. We are going to be talking this evening about the research cycle. So powering through the research cycle all the way from your ideas to that final publication. So thank you once again for joining us. Thanks once again for listening. And thank you for being here. It's great, really great to see so many colleagues joining us this evening. If you haven't heard about Bentham Science, Bentham is a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher. Pharmacy, pharmacology, neuropharmacology, more than 160 online and print journals. Do check out Bentham Science. We have a range of solutions for publishers, a range of solutions for researchers in various disciplines. If you're listening to this and you are a librarian, just quickly, or you're working with a research institution and you'd like to get access to Bentham content for your library, for your researchers, no obligation, all of the content, all 166 journals, free, no charge. Do scan the QR code here on the screen in front of you. This means that you can have in your institution all of the Bentham Science content for a 3-month period. So do have a look at that if you are interested, in particular in the kinds of content that Bentham Science is publishing: medical, science, pharmacology, organic chemistry. Check out Bentham Science. Have a scan of that QR code there on the screen. That's enough of that rubbish. As we get started in our training event today, we are going to be talking about 3 things this evening: planning and journal selection, effective research writing for success and submitting your next paper to an international journal. This is the wheel, the publication wheel. You may remember this from our first session together. We are, all of us, taking our research around this wheel all of the time. You might have ideas, searching for funding, collecting data, selecting a journal, writing a paper, submitting that article to a journal, and then dealing with peer review and publication. All of these different aspects of the research cycle, we are doing them all the time as active researchers. You may have several papers at different stages, several projects at different stages of this wheel. I like to call it the hamster wheel of research, of the research life cycle, the publication cycle. There's lots to talk about, lots of information to share. If this is not enough for you and you'd like more, we have lots of content on YouTube, on Substack, on LinkedIn. There's loads of opportunities to learn for free, of course. Lots more content, lots more ways to manage your research and publishing journey. But today we only have time to talk about 3 of these aspects: planning and journal selection, effective research writing, and then submission and peer review. So let's get going. Let's start talking about powering our way through the research cycle as we begin and we start to talk about English academic communication. You may remember this from the last time that we met. If you were in the first session that I did with your organization, with the International Pharmacy Student Federation. Dear sir, dear madam, many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but unfortunately, we are simply not willing to publish it. The trouble is that the good bits were not original and the original bits were not good. We get these kinds of letters back from international journals all of the time. You will have had them. I've had them. Often issues with writing and understanding the publication cycle can cause issues with the acceptance of research in journals. And that's why we're here. That's why we do these training sessions, to help you with managing the publication process, helping you to understand how you can best get your work steered, get your work into international journals. And of course, a lot of this as well is about maximizing your impact, thinking about the different kinds of research impact that you make when you write and publish an academic paper, how you can maximize your impact. And it's not just about your academic impact. It's not just about journals. It's not just about where you publish your papers. We'll talk about that in this training session this evening. It's also about the difference, the economic and societal benefits that your research makes to the world, to the general public, to ordinary people. So let's also, as well as writing and publishing and getting our papers into the best possible journals, let's also think about how we can manage our impact as researchers. What difference is your work making to the lives of ordinary people? What academic impact are you having? What impact factor journals are you publishing in? Of course, we all want to do that. We all want to publish in Scopus Q1, Q2 journals, but also what difference, what societal difference is your work making? So maximizing your impact, managing the research cycle, because of course, in terms of impact, publications remain at the heart of the way in which researchers are assessed at universities around the world. We all count papers, we look at impact factors. We want to know our R and our H index. Your institutions will be counting citations, they'll be looking at circulation. But does your research circulation actually translate to impact? How many researchers around the world will actually cite your research. And these are very, very, very important considerations for everybody working in research today. Impact is important, and it's not just about where you end up publishing your research, which of course is very important. You need to get those high impact factor papers to get your PhD, to get your master's, but we are also keen to emphasize that you, especially as pharmacists, especially as medical health science researchers, are going to be making a difference with your research to the lives of ordinary people. And so often we face issues in steering, managing our research into those international journals. International publishers, often they reject our excellent research, of course. Why is that? And common problems, as you may remember from our first webinar together, are encountered by researchers. You may submit outside of the journal scope. You may have plagiarized by mistake, and we talked about that last time as well. Your paper may have been incorrectly formatted. Still an issue for international journals, less and less so, thankfully. But your English writing and how you manage reviewer responses when you get your paper back from the journal after peer review can also be an issue. So why are you facing difficulties getting your research published? These are all issues that we'll talk about in our event this evening. How to manage the publication process, how to deal with your paper, how to steer your paper successfully into an international journal. And we'll also talk about strategies for engagement, improving your science communication skills, being able to effectively explain the value and the impact of your research to the wider world, to the community around you, in order to justify your funding. Why have you been given money for this piece of research? Why are you doing a PhD? Where did the funding come from? How are you going to justify that to the wider community? You can communicate about your research more effectively. You can learn to be better at public speaking, at engagement, at online training, online events. It's important not just to do fantastic research. Of course, you're all doing absolutely amazing, fantastic research, but you've also got to be able to communicate that research to the ordinary people around you, the general public, to funding agencies, to the government, to your university. So engagement, we're also going to talk about that in our training this evening, how to communicate effectively about your research. So that's the background, that's the basis, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're talking about powering our way around the research cycle. Let's start off by thinking about planning and journal selection. And you may remember from our first webinar together, if you can cast your mind back that far, or you're listening to the recording, maybe this one, and then the one before it, before this one, we talked about 3 things that you should remember or think about before you begin to write your next paper. And they are message, audience, and structure. If you can remember those things from my earlier presentation, that would be absolutely fantastic. Your message. What's the story of your research? How are you going to talk about your research, communicate your research out there in your writing, your message? Your audience then is the second thing. And that, of course, is all about your target journal. Where are you going to submit your next paper? Which journal are you going to choose? Which target journal are you going to use? How are you going to plan and select an appropriate outlet for your next research article? Journal selection is hugely important. Very, very, very important. And it's often not something that researchers think about all that much. They just send their papers to where their supervisor tells them to send them, or they send their articles to a journal that one of their friends has been recently published in. But journal selection is key. Message, audience, your journal, and structure. Very, very important in that planning and preparing to write phase. So we'll talk about this first this evening. Why journal selection? Finding the best possible journal for your next paper. Why is this so important? Well, journal selection can help you to speed up the publication of your research. It can help you maximize the impact of your next article. And we're also going to help you to detect and avoid those fake journals when you think about putting your article together as well. Journal selection is hugely important. So, but let's make sure that you're all still awake. Let's definitely not just have this as me shouting and screaming for the whole of the event this evening. Give me some answers to this question. Everybody listening to this, when is the best time to select a journal for your next article, for your next paper? Is it A, before writing the paper? Is it B, while writing your manuscript? Or is it C, after writing your paper? And I can see in the chat box lots and lots and lots of A's coming in because we've already been talking about this evening. The best time to pick a journal for your next paper, of course, is before you begin the writing process. And many people make a mistake. Many people don't do that. As we talked about last time, many researchers around the world, they write up a manuscript, they write up a paper, and then they think, where am I going to submit this? Which journal am I going to send this to? And that's the wrong way around, because if you select a journal before you begin the writing process, you can then answer many of the questions that you have about the structure of your article, about the structure of your writing, what goes into the different sections, how much information to put into the introduction, into the methods, what should my figure captions look like, what should my abstract look like, for example. So absolutely, thank you all for engaging with my short, quick poll there on the chat. Before you start to write is the best time to select a journal. And this is why. Every journal is different. They have a different scope, a different audience, a different length. What kind of paper you might write will also be different. Will it be a letter? Will it be a rapid communication? And you can self-evaluate when it comes to your journal selection. You really can do it very effectively. And there are a number of great reasons to do this, because if you know the aims and scope of a journal, you can look at the readership, the disciplines, the topics, the types of articles. You know the kinds of guidelines that that journal has, their peer review process, their formatting, word limits, kinds of English even. Picking a journal early, and you should have a list of journals that many top researchers in your field are regularly using. Rank that list by impact factor. Put that list in order from top to bottom. Which journals have the best impact factors, and aim high with your submissions to make sure that you have the best chance of effectively publishing your research. So we have a few rules for journal selection. Aiming high. Choosing appropriately, of course, and learning to sell and manage your submissions to international journals. You can't publish everything that you write in Nature and Science, but you can choose appropriately. And of course, we're here to help you to manage and learn how to target your work to the best journals possible. And by the way, there are very, 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 very few journal selection tools out there online that you can use to help you select a journal that are not tied to a publisher. So taking off my Bentham Science hat for a moment, there is one tool called the EDANCE Journal Selector tool that is not associated with a publisher, that you can look at, that you can use, that will give you journal choices based on the keywords, the abstract, the title, whatever you want, that you paste into the tool that you can then use to get some great suggestions for your next submission. So do have a look at the EDANCE Journal Selector tool. If you haven't seen it before, it's a great one for you. It's independent of publishers, which is a big deal because most of the journal selection tools, if you Google journal selection, how can I find a journal, you'll get publisher tools. So Springer Nature has a tool, Wiley has a tool, Taylor and Francis have a tool. They're pushing you towards their own academic journal. So be careful about that as well. In terms of selecting a journal, we're looking as researchers at impact factor. We're looking at reputation. We're looking at reach within the field, and we're looking at whether the journal is open access or not. Because effective journal selection is a marriage between your research and its eventual publication. And as we've talked about before, thinking about this before you begin the writing process can be really, really, really beneficial as you begin and you think, what's the impact factor? I've got my list of journals from my field that leading researchers I respect usually publish their work in. I've looked at their websites. I've seen where they're putting their papers. I've ranked those journals by impact factor. I also know about the reputation, the reach within my own research area, as well as open access and accessibility. And by the way, of course, there are many ways that you can self-evaluate. If you're not sure if a journal is too good for your next paper, then have a look at this checklist to critically evaluate your own work. How novel, original is your paper within a known context? How good are your methods, the study design, the data analysis? Have you minimized bias to maximize your study's validity and reliability? What are the real world implications of your work, its applications, its influence, and for how long? Is your study ethically compliant in terms of data, trials, publishing, authorship, etc.? And is your writing highly readable and suitable for non-specialist, non-native speaking readers? If you're not sure about how to use this, if you're not sure about your next paper and you need some help, do get in touch with us. Do get in touch and we will be able to help you further with this information. So how good is the journal? Will your work be good enough for that journal? There are definitely ways that you can critically evaluate your work. And of course, understanding the different kinds of journals as well is very important. And this slide just summarizes those different types of journals that we have out there around in the world. There's more than 57,000 journals publishing articles out there in the wide world. So how are you going to pick one that's good for your research? Well, let's start with gold open access journals. These are journals that are completely open. If you send a paper to them and your paper gets accepted, it will be published fully open access. These journals are often based upon a fee. You have to pay an article processing charge after acceptance for publication in one of these journals. So be careful, but the content is available to anyone. We've all considered these journals. Often they have a slightly lower impact factor than some of the traditional journals, and there's a predatory problem here. There's a problem that there's a business model associated with this that can capture you, that can convince you to pay money for a publication in a gold open access journal. But they are open. There's an article processing charge, but these journals are open. Anyone can publish in them. Whereas traditional journals, you publish for free, but then the content is sold back to universities and libraries. The content is held behind a paywall. We've all published in these journals, but some colleagues can't access our papers. Those are the two main kinds of journals that we see out there in the wide world: traditional journals and gold open access. There's an intermediate form called green open access, and in those situations you might get a paper accepted in Nature, for example. Well done, that would be fantastic. You could then put your final accepted version, the final draft version of your paper, onto ResearchGate, onto your website, not the final PDF that the journal accepted, but the final version that went into production, into an archive like ResearchGate, like your website. After a period of time, you're publishing green open access. These are the different kinds of journals that we encounter. Watch out for fake ones, because of course, some open access journals are fake. They're also known as predatory journals. They'll try to cheat you out of your money. They're getting more sophisticated. It can be difficult to spot them. We have lots of content, lots of training, lots of other information for you about these kinds of journals. Just get in touch if you need help. Have a look at the EdAnts Journal Selector. Also have a look at a website called Think, Check, Submit, the directory of open access journals. These are all good places for you to have a look to make sure that the journal you've chosen for your next submission is really above board. It's really a good one. It's really going to help you with your research career. There are a number of ways that you can spot a fake journal. We don't have lots of time to talk about these this evening, but I do have other trainings, other content, other information out there that you can use to spot, to help you to select a good journal for your next paper. But have a look at these markers. Is the website strange? Is it listed in good indices like the DOAJ? Who's on the editorial board? Is the journal publishing regularly? Are the articles properly peer-reviewed? Do they match with the aims and scope of the journal? Is the journal charging fees at submission? That's a big no-no. You should never, ever pay anything to a journal until after your paper has been accepted. And is the journal sending lots of spam, lots of emails full of empty promises? Real journals are listed, they're indexed, they're in COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, they're in the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, and so on. The journal will have a robust peer review process. The fees and policies are fair, clearly listed and explained in detail. Do have a look at these websites: Think, Check, Submit, publicationethics.org, doaj.org, oaspa.org. These are great resources for you when selecting a journal for your next research paper. And also, very, very, very good suggestion is when it comes time to write up and submit your next paper, also consider pre-printing that piece of information as well. You can pre-print at any stage of the research process. Lots of people do it with their conference abstracts, for example. These are often complete or incomplete research papers shown to the public before peer review and then publication in a journal. People worry about copyright priority. Don't worry, you're actually much more protected if you put your work onto a preprint server than you would be if you didn't. Imagine if you go to a conference, you give a talk, you publish an abstract, pre-print that information so that nobody can gazump you, nobody can steal your information. Your work will be protected by a Creative Commons license. And again, if you're confused about what this means, do get in touch. We can help. Pre-printing is a great way to protect your research IP at the start of the process, and you do need to have an ORCID ID. If you haven't got one, do get one, because these are unique researcher identification numbers that tell you apart from other researchers. You're able to distinguish yourself in 3 easy steps. You've seen these little green IDs around and on research papers, of course. You may need one for your next submission. There are many people called John Smith in the UK. How am I going to know that the John Smith I'm emailing is the one that I want to talk to? Well, I do it by looking at his ORCID ID. Very great way to distinguish yourself, to make sure that you're getting credit for all of the research that you publish. So that's the first bit, planning and journal selection. Let's have a quick look at effective research writing. And you've seen this roadmap before as well. As we prepare to write, we think about selling ourselves to journals, to editors, capturing an editor's attention. We think about structure, having a clear structure so that our readers never get lost, and using effective writing following simple rules that make a huge difference to our effective publication success. We've been here before. I know you'll remember this. The things that you need to know before you start to write your message, your audience, that's your journal, and the structure of your writing. Let's also think about building a mentorship group, the people that we interact with, the people that we work with, the people that we email, the people that we engage with on social media in our own research area, because these are the people who you are going to use when you send papers to journals as peer reviewer suggestions. So are international colleagues aware of you and aware of your work? It's another great reason to consider pre-printing your research, by the way. Then more people are going to be aware of you and your research. And you'll remember our friend Arnold from the first webinar that we did together. When writing an academic paper, you need a plan, you need a structure, you need to be like our good friend Arnold, putting a plan and a structure in place before you start to write. Don't write if English is not your native language in an unstructured way. You need a plan. You need to be like Arnold, putting your article structure in place before you begin. How are you going to do that? Well, that's why it's important to have a journal in mind before you start, because once you have a journal in mind, you can build your structure like the famous IMRAD academic structure out from the articles that you look at in your target journal. People are going to read your paper in this order. Of course they are. The title, the abstract, the introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. Your introduction, why did you do the study? Your methods, how did you do the study? Your results, what did you find? And your discussion, what does your study mean? This is the reading order of your paper. But of course, they're not going to read in the same order in which you write. You're going to put your paper together in a different order, aren't you? I mean, you don't start with the title and write the abstract and then write the introduction and keep on going like Alice in Wonderland until you get to the end of the story. You will be writing from the methods, the results, and then the discussion, maybe the introduction, putting the title and the abstract together at the end. This is what we like to call the right order for putting academic articles together. Usually, people make data. They analyze data. They make figures. They make tables. And they talk about their data at the beginning of the article writing process, right? Usually the methods or the results are the first bits that you put together. And this is how you'll build up your academic article. We talked a bit about this in our first session together. If you're interested, if you'd like to learn more, loads more content, loads more training, get in touch. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'd like a training session for my research group, for my students, do get in touch. We have lots more information and training around all of these different parts of the academic cycle, but in particular around English language writing. And so with that in mind, one of the most common questions that people ask is which tense to use in which section. Don't get tense, I like to say. There's always an answer, and most of it is in the present tense. In most of your paper, you will be able to get your message across most effectively using the present tense. So have a look at this. Some examples on this slide, of course, will give you the recording. Everybody will get access to all of these slides. You can have a look at this a little bit later, but the tenses to use in the different sections of your writing are important as well. As we drill down and think about your research question, what is the question that your paper addresses? You need to let your reader know your research question at the start of the article, because this sets up an expectation for the rest of the study, the rest of the paper, the rest of the grant, using explicit phrases, question words, stating your hypothesized effect, identifying your variables and your study design with crisp and clear writing techniques, as we discussed in our first session together. Signal your research question, keep a consistent order, repeat key terms, keep a consistent point of view, parallel ideas in parallel forms, and topic sentences with transitions and key terms. A great resource, Ziga 22 Essentials of Writing Research Papers. I can give you the PDF of this if you're interested at the end of this session today. And as we discussed last time, there are a number of tricks, tips that you can follow when writing effectively in English. Try to think in English and write as you think. Try to write a little bit every day, a little bit and often in English. Read and analyze papers that you like and respect in your field for style, for shape, for structure and presentation. And if you translate, use a subject area specialist. My top tip for young researchers, especially when putting together a paper, find an example of a paper similar to the kind of paper that you want to write that has recently been published effectively in a journal that you would like to see your work published in. Go and have a look at how successful researchers write and publish their research, and that will help you a lot as you put your next article together. You can copy the style of successfully put together research articles with one complex idea per sentence. Short sentences, on average 20 words, never more. Keep the verb and subject close together. We measured. Favor active rather than passive verbs. We concluded rather than it can be concluded that. Cutting out unnecessary adjectives. Avoiding jargon, using short and simple words. And of course, no double negatives. Once again, if you need more help with your English, if you need more help with your writing, we are here to help. Because of course, as you will remember, the most common mistakes in English are plagiarism by mistake, the incorrect use of tenses and switches, the incorrect use of spelling conventions, for example, and inappropriate word use, inappropriate word use and word use confusion. I see people are asking in the chat about the screen. I hope that you can see my screen. If you can't, then hopefully somebody from the organizing team will interrupt me, tell me to shut up screaming and shouting, and we can get that problem fixed immediately. The most common mistakes in English: plagiarism, tenses and switches, spelling conventions, and inappropriate word use and word use confusion. Words to avoid in your scientific writing: things that are emotional, reckless, crank, sound good, superior, superlatives. I love these, especially in my subject in geology. A gigantic new dinosaur, an earth-shattering new hypothesis, a magnificent result, a marvelous study. These are not good words to use in your academic writing. And also common modifiers like very, more, much, vastly, greatly. You are an academic. You are a researcher. You are able to quantify your research. You don't need to use words like these common modifiers. And also, by the way, contractions in academic writing, no place for these either. Can't, didn't, wasn't, there, and were. Cut them out of your academic writing. These are examples of words to avoid. We also recommend that you avoid direct quotes unless you're presenting another author's specific definition or original label. Instead, paraphrase using AI potentially, but always take care to properly cite your source. Reading and rereading your references. Consult a textbook or another reference to help you resolve any aspects of the paper you don't understand before you start to write. And be careful about self-plagiarism. This is where you take your own previously published text, papers, or research results and report them again as if they were brand new. We've all done this. I know I have. You publish a map or a table or a figure in one paper of your own. You think, I own that. I can reuse that, but you can't use it again without citing yourself. You can't reuse a data set from a previous study without making your reader aware. You can't submit a manuscript containing data, conclusions, or passages that have already been published. You've got to cite your own previous publication. And of course, you can't submit multiple similar papers about the same study to different journals. We have other presentations about ethics in publishing, in research. If you're interested in learning about those, do get in touch with me as well. We don't have a great deal of time to talk about these issues today, but you should be careful about plagiarizing yourself, because this is one of the most common issues that researchers face in the publication process. Right. Finally, number 3, we've talked about planning and journal selection. We've talked about effective research writing a little bit in our presentation today in the time that we have. Let's talk about submitting your paper, managing the peer review process. Now, I like to show this slide because, of course, when we use the English word editor, when we talk about editors at journals, there are, of course, several different kinds of people that we could be involved with. So editor in English has quite a broad meaning. There could be several different kinds of people who are editors in the publication process. A language editor, for example, edits the English. They tend to live at home. I've put a field guide together, a handy field guide for academic publishing. Your language editor will be working on the English. Your academic editor will be controlling the journal content. And that could be somebody like me or your professor at the university who's managing a journal while also working in an academic role. And the journal managing editor is somebody who works for the publisher. They've got that business perspective. And often their subject area understanding is quite limited. So be careful when talking to editors that you understand the different kind of editor that you are interacting with. Because, of course, the first step of article submission, sending a paper to a journal, is what we call triage. Editorial triage, the first stage of the submission process. When your paper goes into a journal, a desk editor will be looking at your submission before it goes out for peer review, and they will be thinking, does this paper fit with the journal's scope? Does the article have a clear message? Is the article original? Is it important? Is it true? And is it relevant to our readers? Because the higher impact factor your journal, Nature, Science, they reject 9 out of 10 papers before they send them out for peer review. So your message, remember your message, you've got to sell yourself to get your article through journal triage. High impact factor journals, they want to maintain high rejection rates. So have a think about what you've got. Have a think about making your submission. Have a think about how you're going to convince your editor that your paper is important and interesting. And with this in mind, let's have a quick think about whether you can make pre-submission inquiries. So have a think about this question. It's not so straightforward as the first one I asked you this evening. How many pre-submission inquiries can you send to journals at a time? Is it only 1 at a time? Is it up to 3? Or is it an unlimited number of pre-submission inquiries that you can send to a journal? And I see, yes, absolutely. Many people are coming with the right answer. You're all doing absolutely fantastic this evening. You can send an unlimited number of pre-submission inquiries to journals. It's not like you're making a submission. When you submit a research article to a journal, you are going to be signing a declaration that ties you to that journal, that says, I'm not submitting this journal article to any other journals. I'm just sending it to Nature. I'm just sending it to Science. But when you make pre-submission inquiries, you can make as many as you like. And so for researchers, this is a very, very, very important strategy that you can follow when finding a journal for your next paper. You can send as many pre-submission inquiries as you like. You can write 100, 200, send out those pre-submission inquiries to journals, inquire journal editors whether they would be interested in seeing your paper submitted to their journal. Write to as many editors as you like. Select a target journal effectively. Reach out with your abstract. Reach out with your title. Whatever you've got, we'll provide you with an email template at the end of our webinar this evening. But when you're starting to think about which journal to send your paper to, write to editors, make pre-submission inquiries, ask them if they would be interested in seeing your submission sent to their journal. And then when you actually make your submission, when you actually send your paper in to your journal of choice, make sure you put together an effective cover letter. This is the most common kind. This is the worst kind. People send us journal article submissions all the time and they don't write a cover letter at all. They just send us nothing. We're expected to understand the paper. We're expected to be able to understand why it's important, and we can't. We are not subject area specialists. This is also very common. It's the almost worst kind of cover letter. It's boring. Dear editor, please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. It is useless. It contains no information. It's almost as bad as writing nothing. You need to put some information into your cover letter that will help me, the editor, understand why this paper is important and interesting. Dear editor, with the name spelled correctly, please find our original research article, which we are submitting for publication in your journal. Put the name of the journal in the cover letter. We believe that your readers would benefit from our new findings and past studies, our key findings, our study advances. We are suggesting the following people as peer reviewers. So give the editor enough information about your study so that he or she can understand why this paper should be submitted, should be sent for peer review in their journal. Maximize your chances of success. Do a pre-submission inquiry, do a cover letter, write an effective one, capture the editor's attention, make sure that you are maximizing your chances of success, because the cover letter is one of the first bits of a paper that your editor's going to read. So make it count. Why is your topic important? Why are the results significant? What's the key result, the breakthrough? Why is this an advance on previous work? Why are you submitting to this journal? And who are you suggesting as potential peer reviewers for the study? Very, very important. Maximizing your chances of publication success with an effective cover letter. People do not put enough attention, enough effort into this section of their articles. And of course, communicating effectively with journals is also very important. When you write to editors and you communicate with them, this is key. Don't write, "Where's my paper? I've waited 2 months, looking forward for an immediate reply." Write something polite, helpful, something that gives information to the editor, like, "I'm writing to ask if I can do something to help speed up my recent submission to your journal. Can I make some suggestions for additional peer reviewers?" Communicate, be effective, be polite, and give something back to your journal editor. I get so many emails all of the time that are just plain rude, that are just not helpful, that do not help me to manage the article and understand what's going on and help the authors. You need to make sure that editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses to their letters, to their content, to their articles that come in peer review. We'd like to thank the reviewer. The reviewer has correctly pointed out. We acknowledge that. We concur with the reviewer. However, Bad responses would include, I do not think the reviewers understand my point. It is not necessary to change this according to the reviewer's suggestion. We simply do not have the data. Repeating the experiences would not actually change our conclusion. Make your editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses. Make them feel that they are happy about the comments, about the communication that you make with them throughout the writing and publishing process. We would like to thank the 2 reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. We've made almost all the changes requested and enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document and figure captions. Our responses to comments received in review are summarized in this document and also interleaved in red. Effectively responding to review comments is very, very important as well. We would like to thank reviewer 1 for this insightful and accurate comment. You see, reviewers read this and they think, yes, I made an insightful and accurate comment. We've reworked all our analyses as requested. Thank you for this editorial comment. We have corrected our paper throughout. The way that you communicate with journals, the way that you communicate with editors can make a big difference to your article's chances of success. And don't worry if you get rejected. This is common. If you genuinely think that your research was important, was well done, well written, and deserves to reach the journal's audience, you can write an appeal letter because, of course, what's the worst that can happen? The paper's already been rejected. It can stay rejected if you feel unfairly treated in the peer review process. Write to the editor and make an appeal because in my experience, and here's just a few examples of my papers that would never have gotten published if I hadn't written to the editor and appealed what we felt were unfair sets of peer review, you will miss out potentially on publications that could change your career. Be confident. Believe in the quality of your research. This is one of the keys to success for you as an international researcher. Being confident, being happy and believing that your work is good. If you feel unfairly treated in the peer review process, talk to your editor, because at the end of the day, as we've been talking about this evening, communication is key. And all of this training, all of the work that we do, all of this is about maximizing your success as a writing and publishing international researcher. So any questions, any issues, you can always feel free to ask, or you can get in touch with me directly. Here's my email address. I have a blog. It's gareth.dyke@substack.com. You can also find me easily on LinkedIn. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for listening. It's been amazing to have the chance to do this presentation again this evening. And thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, let's see if there are any questions or if you're all fast asleep at the end of that session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gareth. That was very, very insightful and very, very educative. I'll open the floor for questions, but I want to read, there are some 3 questions in the chat, so I'll read it so that Dr. Gareth, you kindly answer. Then if anybody has a question to ask, they'll mute themselves and ask. So the first question is there any words count limit in the cover letter?
Well, technically, no, there's no word count limit in the cover letter, but you do want to keep it as short as possible. So I wouldn't write like a 3,000 or 4,000 word cover letter. I would follow a template, and we'll give you a template at the end of the session to make sure that your cover letter is short and effective, because you don't need a lot of information. You just need to tell the editor why the paper is important and interesting for that journal. So the answer is no, but keep it short and keep it effective. But that's a great question. Thank you very much for that.
The next one is, do we have to write a cover letter to a journal before submitting a review article?
Absolutely. A review article, very important. You should always get in touch with a journal before you write a review article. You need to be invited by a journal to write a review article, or you need to have an agreement from a journal that they will be interested in publishing your paper. So you do need to make sure that you have that in place. So do get in touch with a journal. If you're thinking of writing a review paper, get in touch with a journal or journals before you start the writing process, because it's very difficult to get a review paper published if you don't have a target journal already lined up. So yeah, to answer that question, you absolutely do need to communicate closely with a journal if you're thinking about writing a review paper. Okay, thank you for that question.
Okay, next question. Practically, how is the submission of a manuscript to the journal done? Is it via email?
That's another good question. It depends on the journal, but most journals now, almost all journals, especially reputable ones, are using online submission systems of various kinds. ScholarOne, Editorial Manager, Open Journal System. So usually you would be uploading files into an online system for your journal of choice, rather than sending files over email. It's not impossible that you would be sending files over email, but usually now it's done through an online submission system. And if you have problems with that or questions about that, do feel free to get in touch with me and I can help you with that. Okay.
Okay. Next question. Is there a difference between a manuscript and a paper?
No, I'm talking about the same thing. A manuscript is just a word for, another word for a paper. So I might write a manuscript, we might call it, and then send that manuscript to a journal. And then when it gets published, it is a peer-reviewed paper. But yeah, these are synonyms really in English. So apologies for the confusion if I've caused confusion. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm talking about writing academic papers. Okay, thank you for that question.
How can we be awarded or receive money from peer reviewing?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. How can we receive money or be rewarded from peer reviewing? Well, have a look at Reviewer Credits. It's a great website. Reviewer Credits is a place you can go, you can sign up and you can get rewarded and recognized for peer review, but not in the form of money. Some publishers, especially book publishers, will pay a little bit of money to peer reviewers. So have a look at that. Have a look at reviewercredits.com if you haven't seen it before. But yeah, most journals, excuse me, most journals, when you do peer review, they'll give you like a reward, but it will be in the form of a token or a discount on the services and products from that particular publisher. So I mean, Reviewer Credits is one place you can go that gives you like publisher independent rewards. Okay. And I see, is there a reviewer community that we can ask to review our papers? Hisham, not really. I mean, you need to build a network around you of people that you communicate, that you know, that people know about your research and talk about your research, so that you can suggest those people when you submit a paper to a journal. Great questions. Thank you so much.
So the last two, can you please repeat the tools used to check fake journals?
Oh yeah, the EdAnts Journal Selector. EdAnts. Have a look at this one, the EdAnts Journal Selector. That's the one you want. I don't know the URL, but you'll find it in a moment if you stick it into Google. It's called the EdAnts Journal Selector tool. Okay?
Okay, so the last question is there a difference between predatory journal and reputable journal?
Oh yeah, great question, Quadri. Yes, absolutely. A predatory journal is an open access journal that just wants to take your money and is not really interested in actually publishing your paper in any way that you would then get recognition for that publication academically. They're not going to peer review it properly. They're probably not listed in any of the reputable listing agencies. So that's a predatory journal. Remember, the open access business model that we talked about before is based upon authors paying for their papers to be published online open, right? So as a result of this open access business model, we've seen predatory journals springing up that provide that service but are not actually listed. So yeah, Quadri, there's a huge difference between predatory journals and reputable journals. Be very careful. You want your work to be published in a reputable journal that uses peer review so that you can then get recognition for that publication at your research institute. So a Scopus Q1, Scopus Q2 journal will be a reputable journal. It will be using peer review. Thank you for the questions. Great. Wonderful.
Okay. So thank you very, very much, Dr. Garrett. It was very insightful as usual and very, very educative. It was great having you. And I hope everyone learned a lot. And we'll send the assignments that you're supposed to do shortly. And also do make sure that you also do the assignments within the time frame that you are given. So kindly put on your video so that we'll take a picture and then we'll finally call it a day. So everybody kindly put on your video so that we can take a picture.
Okay, great. Let's turn on your videos, guys. Perfect. Only 1 minute. So much great. I will take the first page right now. So be prepared, guys. Smile. Yeah, great. This is. For the second page. The third page, and moving to the last page. So much great. Thank you so much, Dr. Garis, for being with us for this webinar. It will be very, very, very nice to have you within us. As you see from our participants, they are really got inspired from the session you have delivered, from the both of the sessions actually, as we're proceeding now into the IPSF Global Research Project, where we'll learn our participants the principles of research. So thank you so much, Dr. Garis, for all of your support. And thanks to all participants for joining us today. And yeah, of course, waiting for you in our upcoming webinars. I will send you for you all of the pictures as well, so that you can highlight your experience in LinkedIn and all of your social media. So yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye, guys, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.